To be totally frank, I, I, I don't know if at least no one at Tesla has actually brought up whether they care about this bill or not. I think if this bill happened or didn't happen, I don't know. We don't think about it at all, really. We're running this incredible deficit. Something's got to give. I don't know. This can't keep going. It might be better if the bill doesn't pass, because we've spent so much money. It's like the federal budget deficit is insane. It's like $3 trillion. Federal expenditures are $7 trillion. Federal revenue is $4 trillion. That's a $3 trillion difference in. If this was a company, it'd be a $3 trillion loss. So. I don't know if we should be adding to that loss. That seems pretty crazy. Something's got to give. You can't just spend $3 trillion more than you own every year and expect, don't expect something bad to happen. I think, this is not good. The deficit is more than $3 trillion when you look at the future obligations. So it's $7 trillion of current expenditures, but it's much more than that if you look at future obligations for Social Security, Medicare, and so forth. So I think the role of government should be that of like a referee, but not a player on the field. Generally, government should, I think, just try to get out of the way and not impede progress. I think there's a general problem, not just in the U.S., but in most countries, where the rules and regulations keep increasing every year. Rules and regulations are immortal. They don't die. There's not a natural. Occasionally you see some law with a sunset provision, but really otherwise the vast majority of rules and regulations live forever. And so if more rules and regulations are applied every year, and it just keeps growing and growing, eventually it takes longer and longer, and it's harder to do things. And there's not really an effective garbage collection system for removing rules and regulations. And so gradually this hardens the arteries of civilization, where you're able to do less and less over time. So I think government should be really trying hard to get rid of rules and regulations that perhaps had some merit at some point, but don't have merit currently. But there's very little effort in this direction. This is a big problem. We generally could have better airports, better highways, and I think that especially in cities that are congested, we've got to do something to deal with the extreme traffic, which I think is some combination of double-deckering freeways and building tunnels. But if we don't do something, we will be stuck in traffic for forever. As autonomous vehicles come to the fore, and it's easier to drive without going through the pain of having to drive yourself, which is absolutely coming, and will be one of the biggest transformations ever in human civilization. There will be more cars on the road, and the traffic will get much worse. And so we really need to do some combination of tunnels and like I said, double-deckering freeways. I'm not a big believer in flying cars. They're basically helicopters with wheels, and people don't want the skies to be swarming with helicopters. So it's tunnels and double-deckering freeways. We don't have a traffic problem in suburbs. We have a traffic problem on freeways because they were just too small and did not anticipate the size of the urban environments that we currently experience. So, but I don't see a strong effort in this direction. But just going back to that infrastructure bill for a second, because sometimes the criticism of Tesla is like, hey, Tesla gets all these subsidies, but it's worth noting that for the vehicle purchase tax credit, the $7,500, Tesla stopped getting that like 2 years ago. So whereas everyone else, I think, except for GM, still gets the $7,500 tax credit. So all of our sales this year and I think last year were had nothing to do with the tax credit because we were no longer eligible because we'd made so many electric cars. Tesla's made roughly 2/3 of all the electric cars in the United States. I'm not sure if most people are aware of that. So Tesla's made basically twice as many electric vehicles as the rest of industry combined. And we don't need the $7,500 tax credit. I would say, honestly, I would just can this whole bill. Don't pass it. That's my recommendation. Do we need support for gas stations? We don't. So there's no need for this for support for a charging network. I would delete it. Delete. I'm literally saying get rid of all subsidies, but also for oil and gas. But I think just generally, I'm in favor of deleting subsidies. I mean, when we started Tesla, there were no EV subsidies at all, and gasoline was super cheap. We did not anticipate any subsidies. That came later, and that came the $7,500 tax credit came as a result not of Tesla activity, but of General Motors lobbying for it. I would just say just delete them all. In general, we should just if we don't cut government spending, something really bad's going to happen. This is crazy. Our spending is so far in excess of revenue, it's insane. Like you could zero out all billionaires in the country. There's all this like anti-billionaire BS. If you zeroed out all the billionaires, you still wouldn't solve the deficit. I mean, first of all, I pay a lot of tax. I mean, my marginal tax rate is like 53%. So that's not trivial. And then obviously there's like, asset-based taxes, the sales tax, and everything else. There's also the estate tax. I think the estate tax is a good tax. Like if you think of assets beyond a certain level that are far beyond, let's say, somebody's ability to consume, then at a certain point, really what you're doing is capital allocation. So you're not. It's not money for personal expenditures. What you're doing is capital allocation, and it does not make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill in capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government. You can think of the government essentially as a corporation in the limit. The government is simply the biggest corporation with a monopoly on violence. The government is a corporation in the limit. So it is the most corporate thing. It is maximum corporation, but it's also a monopoly, and also is the only one that's allowed legally to do violence. So why would you want to give a corporation with no competition that can't even really go bankrupt more money? Now, it's not as though I think the government shouldn't exist or that there are not good things that the government can do or things that are necessary for the government to do. For example, science programs where we send a probe to Mars, and the value of that is it's a small amount of value for all citizens, but it would be inefficient to sort of go and collect $10 from every citizen for a Mars probe, and so therefore it's better to have the government do something like that, like a heavy science program, rather than try to collect small amounts of money from everyone. So I'm not somebody who's sort of an extreme libertarian and thinks the government should not do anything. I just think we should minimize what the government does, because the government's efficiency at spending is just going to be lower than a competitive commercial company, but by a lot. If you look at, say, East Germany versus West Germany, or North Korea versus South Korea, and you look at the GDP per capita of East and West Germany or North and South Korea, the difference is gigantic. And that's just the difference between East and West Germany. It's like a random line was drawn, basically depending on where the Red Army was and where the Allied troops were. And East Germany's productivity was like at least 5 times worse than West Germany. And it's not like West Germany was like some bastion of capitalism. They were quite socialist, really. So there may be as much as an order of magnitude difference between the efficiency of a competitive private company versus the government.